Hey everyone, my name's Elliot Moss and I'm here today with Clarie Lachow. She's an artist and has done the cover artwork for my new single, I Heard. How are you doing, Claire?
Doing good. How about you?
Pretty good. Just trying to keep busy in quarantine. It's funny, we just had this conversation off the air and we're pretending to do it again, which is... the cover is absolutely gorgeous, and it looks like it's kind of a mix of physical items and like pieces of art and also like some digital imagery. Like, how did you make it?
Yeah, so with a lot of my work, I will make images using 3D modeling software and then print them onto plastic materials like plexiglass or clear vinyl, so that it's sort of this like juxtaposition of like digital imagery in physical space. So that's exactly what I did for the piece that's on the cover of I Heard, which is called Perennial Feeling. It's a 3D model of a magnolia flower that I printed onto plexiglass and then had laser cut into the shape of the hand.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. And then I used a heat gun to sort of create like the gentle texture of the hand, so it's not just like a flat image.
It's so funny. Like, if you asked me, I would say the opposite. I'd say that the plexiglass melted was the rendered part, and the flower was a picture. So it's so cool to hear that it's actually the other way around.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they hear like digital sculpture or something in that vein, they think of like 3D printing, things of that sort. But I like usually go from the opposite approach, where I like start with an image and then try to like make it into a more sculptural object.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, so do you feel that like being like fluent in both like 3D graphics and like real world artistic techniques, like do you are you sometimes maybe tempted to render something that you could just otherwise do in real life because the render would be so much quicker than, say, like, you know, making a bunch of acrylic flowers or something, like just dragging the material onto the 3D model as opposed to really doing it?
That's a really good question. I find that like certainly during like quarantine, I've like rendered some like speculative pieces that I have not been able to like make in real life yet, for digital art shows. But
Gotcha.
Usually I find that actually making the real thing is easier than making the rendering, because in renderings you have to recreate all of the conditions of like physical reality, like gravity and light and shadows and all of that, whereas it all just exists for you in real life. So it's easier to like make it and then just take the photo.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've kind of like, I've never made anything that I think looks any good, but I've like messed around with like physically based modeling or physically based rendering, and like the amount of like light bounces and like simulated photons and all the things that your computer has to deal with, as opposed to just like putting a light up and taking the photo.
Right.
It's incredible like what goes into just making light look real. I would have never known how many bounces and crazy paths that each individual photon takes in a row.
And
So yeah, I mean, speaking of the sort of 3D portion of the art, I mean, could you talk a bit about your choice of the magnolia?
Yeah, totally. I was actually really, really pleased when your team reached out to me about using that imagery, and especially after like hearing this song and watching the music video and stuff, I really see the like connection. But yeah, for me, magnolia flowers are this like really special thing that you get to see once a year for a very short period of time, and I always like look forward to it, and I'm always looking for them. And a couple of years ago, I started like, you know, taking pictures with my phone, like of this one specific magnolia tree that I would walk by every day. And I realized that it's such like a funny, sort of like ironic gesture to like want to photograph the ephemeral magnolia flowers, because it sort of takes away the very quality of them, which I like, which is that they only last for like a very brief period of time. And then you get this sort of like, you know, pixelized, like distanced, sadder version of them, which is like, you know, an iPhone photo of them. So with this piece and with other work that I've done around magnolia flowers, it's always like at this sort of distance. So with the with perennial feeling, I specifically wanted to explore the feeling of like how with digital technology and screens and phones, the only feeling that you can get from them, even though you can experience like images and sounds from like all over the world, from like everywhere, it feels like you have access to everything, but it's all the same like feeling. It's all the same like tempered glass feeling that like you're touching over and over again. So it's sort of like this like distanced, sort of like sad, like impoverished sensory experience that I think about a lot, especially for kids that are like growing up with so many screens around them that they're just learning to like manipulate so deftly, that like I wonder if it's like at the expense of other sensory experiences that they could be having, for example. So it's like the hand with the magnolia flower, but it's a frozen image of a magnolia flower that's forever in bloom because it's like a 3D model of it.
Kind of missing the point of its beauty almost in a sort of like ironic way. I mean, what was really incredibly cool for the shoot for the music video for I Heard was that I've got a cherry blossom in my front yard that does the same thing. It's about we get a week maybe, and we open the video on that sort of as a like an homage to your piece of art, just sort of saying,
I noticed that right away. I mean, I think that feeling of, I think particularly this year in quarantine, the magnolia flower imagery and that sort of idea became even more like prescient, sort of, because like in quarantine everything became so much more intensified, like all of the trends beforehand, like all of the ways that society has been changing became so intensified in quarantine. So like where before, you have this idea that you're like connecting with people a lot through social media or through FaceTime or whatever, but then in quarantine you're solely interacting with people through FaceTime and Zoom and whatever. That like when quarantine started and the magnolia flowers were blooming this year, like usually it's just like, oh, like I want to go see them, but this year there was this like real urgency to like go see the magnolia flowers, because it was this one sign that like time was unfolding and that life was continuing, even when we were sort of like frozen, like as a society, all being like stuck inside these like tiny private worlds. But like the weather changing and like the seasons changing and the trees flowering and all of that was some indication that like there was a continuity of life. And I feel like you capture that really perfectly in your music video, this feeling of like being stuck inside and surrounded by screens and like slowly and like searching for meaning. I particularly resonated with like the one shot of you like leaning on the counter with your like mouth agape, just looking at the dishes like piled up. I was like, oh my god, that has been me so many days, just staring at the dishes.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to kind of like overact all these scenarios that we're all in, and sort of like, what's the most like hyperbolic version of like not having done the dishes is like slamming your head in the sink and just sort of like drowning in the mess, something like that. So yeah, it was really cool, and amazing how the universe kind of just like threw it all together, and we got to like have the cherry blossoms be this thing that I also tried to like work them into the background in the shot a little bit, and like throw to this idea that like I'm like trapped in this little like singular moment that refuses to move on, and like all of these different versions of myself are like judging me for not not being able to escape that moment that I'm clinging on to for whatever reason.
Yeah, and materially just like, oh yeah, the glass with the flower behind it, like that's it. That's perfect.
Yep, that's yeah, that's awesome. Well, so yeah, I mean, I've just got one more question for you. I like to like look at art like yours and video, images, and all sorts of like sort of like expose myself to a lot of like visual stimulus while I'm making music. Do you listen to music while you create art, and like how does that affect your workflow? Do you sort of like curate a playlist or like a style of music to something that you're working on? Like, does it have a, I guess, does it play a lot on what you're doing, or is it more just sort of like a background ambience?
I think it depends on what I'm working on, but definitely when I'm like generating ideas, I find it really helpful to listen to music, and the kind of music that I listen to while I'm generating ideas definitely varies a lot, but I'm super into Bjork, and I've been very inspired by her work and her collaborators, and I think she's just like an amazing, fascinating person. So I really like to listen to her music. So like generous and open-ended, and she really gets the right mix of like interest in the natural world and technology without being like reductive about it.
Right. Yeah.
And but other times, like when I'm doing stuff that's more sort of just like process oriented, like when I'm like doing the 3D modeling and stuff, I'll listen to podcasts or audiobooks, things like that.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, it sort of definitely helps to have something going on in parallel to like the like trying to generate your own original ideas. Sometimes I feel like it like keeps my brain like driving down the road even if I'm not thinking about anything. It's just
absolutely. Yeah, I can't listen to someone like talking at me while I'm trying to like follow the train of the idea, because I feel like I just get too easily derailed. But music like provides the right sort of open framework, as long as it's not too like too lyrical, I guess.
Sure, yeah. Which, yeah, I'm kind of similar to someone talking to you, I guess, too. You get a lot of that going on. Well, yeah, I mean, thank you so much. That's like absolutely fascinating. I mean, as someone who's like his whole life like dabbled in the idea of trying to like dovetail 3D art with the, like what I'm doing and never really succeeded at it, it was like it's an honor to have my music paired with your beautiful rendering, or not what would you call them? Sculpture, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just been an absolute honor. I feel like it fits so incredibly well, and it's been really cool talking about all this stuff with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking me to do it. I was super stoked, and I really like your music, so I thought it was a great fit.